Dear students, in this video I will continue environmental issues. The next is e-wastes. What is e-wastes? Irreparable computers and other electronic goods are known as electronic wastes, nothing but e-wastes. Then how to control e-wastes? E-wastes are buried in landfills or incinerated. Over half of the e-wastes generated in the developed world are exported to developing countries, mainly to China, India and Pakistan, where metals like copper, iron, silicon, nickel and gold are recovered during recycling processes. Unlike developed countries which have specifically built facilities for recycling of e-wastes, recycling in developing countries often involves manual participation, thus exposing workers to toxic substances present in e-wastes. Recycling is the only solution for the treatment of e-wastes, provided it is carried out in an environment friendly manner. The next is a case study on a remedy for plastic waste. So how to control plastic waste? A plastic sack manufacturer in Bangalore has managed to find the ideal solution to the ever increasing problem of accumulating plastic waste. Ahmad Khan, aged 57 years old, has been producing plastic sacks for 20 years. About 8 years ago, he realized that plastic waste was a real problem. Polyblend, a fine powder of recycled modified plastic, was developed then by his company. This mixture is mixed with the bitumen that is used to lay roads. In collaboration with the RV College of Engineering and the Bangalore City Corporation, Ahmad Khan proved that blends of polyblend and bitumen, when used to lay roads, enhanced the bitumen's water repellent properties and helped to increase road life by a factor of 3. The raw material for creating polyblend is any plastic film waste. So against the price of ₹40 per kg that rag pickers had been getting for plastic waste, Khan now offers 6 rupee. Using Khan's technique, by the year 2002, more than 40 kilometers of road in Bangalore has already been laid. At this rate, Khan will soon be running short of plastic waste in Bangalore to produce polyblend. The next is agrochemicals and their effects. In the wake of green revolution, use of inorganic fertilizers and plastics has increased manifold for enhancing crop production. Pesticides, herbicides, fungicides, etc. are being increasingly used. These incidentally are also toxic to non-target organisms that are important component of the soil ecosystem. The addition of increasing amount of chemical fertilizers, leached to aquatic ecosystem leads to eutrophication. The next is a case study on organic farming. Integrated organic farming is a cycled zero waste procedure where waste products from one processes are cycled in as nutrient for other processes. This allows the maximum utilization of resource and increases the efficiency of a production. Ramesh Chandra Dagar, a farmer Sonipat in Haryana, doing just this. He includes beekeeping, dairy management, water harvesting, composting and agriculture in a chain of processes which support each other and allow an extremely economical and sustainable venture. There is no need to use chemicals for crops as cattle excreta means cow dung are used as a manure. Crop waste is used to create compost which can be used as a natural fertilizer or can be used to generate natural gas means a methane for satisfying the energy needs of the farm. Enthusiastic about spreading information and helping on the practice of integrated organic farming, Dagar has created the Haryana Kisan Welfare Club with a current membership of 5,000 farmers. So the next one is radioactive waste. Initially, nuclear energy was hailed as a non-polluting way for generating electricity. Later on, it was realized that the use of nuclear energy has two very serious inherent problems. The first is accidental leakage, as occurred in the 3 Mile Island and Chernobyl incident, and the second is safe disposal of radioactive waste. Radiation that is given off by nuclear waste is extremely damaging the organisms because it causes mutations at a very high rate. At a high doses, nuclear radiation is lethal, but at lower doses, it creates various disorders. The most frequent of all being cancers. Therefore, nuclear waste is an extremely potent pollutant and has to be dealt with the utmost caution. It has been recommended that storage of nuclear waste after sufficient pre-treatment should be done in suitably shielded containers buried within the rocks about 500 meters deep below the earth's surface. However, this method of disposal is meeting stiff opposition from the public. So the next is a very important concept, that is a greenhouse effect. The greenhouse effect is a naturally occurring phenomenon that is responsible for heating of earth's surface and atmosphere. That is called a greenhouse effect. Without greenhouse effect, the average temperature at the surface of earth would have been a chilly, that is a minus 18 degrees Celsius, rather than the present average of 15 degrees Celsius. Clouds and gases reflects about 1/4 of the incoming solar radiation and absorb some of it, but almost half of the incoming solar radiations falls on Earth's surface, heating it, while a small proportion is reflected back to atmosphere. Earth's surface re-emits heat in the form of infrared radiation, IR radiation, but part of these doses not escape into space as atmospheric gases. Example, carbon dioxide, methane, etc. absorb a major fraction of it. The molecules of these gases radiate heat energy, and a major part of which again come to Earth's surface, thus heating up once again. This cycle is repeated many a times. The above mentioned gases like carbon dioxide and methane are commonly called as a greenhouse gases, and other greenhouse gases are a nitrous oxide and a chlorofluorocarbons. The next is a relative contribution of greenhouse gases for global warming. The relative contribution of various greenhouse gases to total global warming is as follows. Carbon dioxide is about 63%, methane is about 20%, chlorofluorocarbon CFC that is about 14%, and a nitrous oxide N2O that is about 6%. So this is about a relative contribution of various greenhouse gases to total global warming. So next is a global warming. Increase in the level of greenhouse gases has led to considerable heating of Earth, leading to global warming. During the past century, the temperature of Earth has increased by 0.6 degrees Celsius, most of it during the last 3 decades. This rise in temperature is leading to deleterious changes in the environment and resulting in odd climatic changes. Example, El Nino effect, thus leading to increased melting of polar ice caps as well as of other places like the Himalayan snow caps. Over many years, this will result in a rise in a sea level that can submerge many coastal areas. The measures to control global warming, including cutting down use of fossil fuel, improving efficiency of energy usage, reducing deforestation, planting trees, and slowing down the growth of human population. International initiatives are also being taken to reduce the emission of greenhouse gases into the atmosphere. So the next one is ozone depletion in a stratosphere. There are two types of ozone layer: ozone, bad ozone and a good ozone. The bad ozone formed in the lower atmosphere, that is troposphere, that harms plants and animals. Good ozone is found in upper part of atmosphere called a stratosphere, and it acts as a shield absorbing UV radiation from the sun. UV rays are highly injurious to living organisms, since DNA and proteins of living organisms preferentially absorb UV rays, and its high energy breaks the chemical bonds within these molecules. The thickness of ozone in a column of air from the ground to the top of the atmosphere is measured in terms of Dobson unit, that is dU. Ozone gas is continuously formed by the action of UV rays on molecular oxygen and also degraded into molecular oxygen in a stratosphere. There should be a balance between production and degradation of ozone in a stratosphere. The next is ozone depletion and in a stratosphere. Of late, the balance has been disrupted due to enhancement of ozone degradation by chlorofluorocarbons or CFCs. Chlorofluorocarbons find wide use as a refrigerants. CFCs discharged in the lower part of atmosphere move upward and reach stratosphere. In a stratosphere, UV rays act on them and releasing chlorine atoms. These chlorine atoms degrades ozone releasing molecular oxygen. With these atoms acting merely as a catalyst, chlorine atoms are not consumed in this reaction. Hence, whatever chlorofluorocarbons are added to the stratosphere, they have permanently and continuing the effect of ozone levels. Although ozone depletion is occurring widely in the stratosphere, the depletion is particularly marked over the Antarctic region. This has resulted in formation of a large area of a thinned ozone layer, commonly called as ozone hole. Recognizing the deleterious effects of ozone depletion, an international treaty known as Montreal Protocol was signed at Montreal in 1987 to control the emission of ozone depleting substances. Subsequently, many more efforts have been made and protocols have laid down definite roadmaps separately for developed and developing countries for reducing the emission of chlorofluorocarbons and other ozone depleting chemicals. The next is the effects of UVB radiations. UV radiations of a wavelength shorter than UVB are almost completely absorbed by Earth's atmosphere, given that ozone layer is intact. UVB damages DNA and mutation, and it causes aging of skin, damage to skin cells, and various types of skin cancers. In a human eye, cornea absorbs UVB radiation, and a high dose of UVB causes inflammation of cornea called snow blindness, cataract, etc. Such exposure may permanently damage the cornea. The next is a degradation of natural resources by improper resource utilization and maintenance. The degradation of natural resources can occur not just by the action of pollutants but also by improper resource utilization practices. That is soil erosion and desertification, water logging and soil salinity. Let us discuss about soil erosion and desertification. The development of fertile topsoil takes place centuries, but it can be removed very easily due to human activities like over cultivation, unrestricted grazing, deforestation, and poor irrigation practices, resulting in arid patches of a land. When large barren patches extended and meet over a time, a desert is created. Internationally, it has been recognized that desertification is a major problem nowadays, particularly due to increased urbanization. The next is a waterlogging and soil salinity. Irrigation without proper drainage of water leads to waterlogging in the soil. Besides affecting the crops, waterlogging draws salt to the surface of the soil. The salt then is deposited as a thin crust on the land surface or starts collecting at the roots of the plants. This increased salt content is inimical to the growth of crops and is extremely damaging to agriculture. Waterlogging and soil salinity are some of the problems that have come in the wake of the Green Revolution. The next one is very important one, deforestation. So deforestation is a conversion of forested areas to non-forested one. According to an estimate, almost 40% of forests have been lost in the tropics compared to only 1% in the temperate region. The present scenario of deforestation is particularly grim in India. At the beginning of the 20th century, forests covered about 30% of the land of India. By the end of the century, it shrunk to 19.4%, where the National Forest Policy of India has recommended 33% of forest cover for the plains and 67% for the hills. How does deforestation occur? A number of human activities contribute to deforestation. One of the major reasons is the conversion of forest to agricultural land as to feed the growing human population. Trees are axed for timber, firewood, cattle, ranching and several other purposes. Slash and burn agriculture are commonly known as jhum cultivation in the northeastern states of India has also contributed to deforestation. With increasing population and repeated cultivation resulted in deforestation. What is slash and burn agriculture? Slash and burn agriculture is commonly known as a jhum cultivation. In a slash and burn agriculture, the farmer cut down the trees for the forest and burn the plant remains. The ash is used as a fertilizer and the land is then used for farming or cattle grazing. After cultivation, the area is left for several years so that as to allow its recovery. The farmers then move on to other areas and repeat this process. In earlier days, when jhum cultivation was in prevalence, enough time gap was given so that the land recovered from the effect of a cultivation. Okay, so the next one is the consequences of a deforestation. One of the major effect is enhanced carbon dioxide concentration in the atmosphere, because trees that could hold a lot of carbon in their biomass are lost with the deforestation. Deforestation is also causes loss of biodiversity due to habitat destruction, disturbs hydrological cycles, causes soil erosion, and may lead to desertification in extreme cases. So the next is a reforestation. So what is reforestation? It is the process of restoring a forest that once existed but was removed at some point of time in the past. Reforestation may occur naturally in a deforested area. However, we can speed it up by planting trees with the due consideration to biodiversity that earlier existed in that area. Okay, so next is the case study of people's participation in conservation of forests. People's participation has a long history in India. In 1931, the king of Jodhpur in Rajasthan asked one of his ministers to arrange wood for constructing. Okay, in 1731, the king of Jodhpur in Rajasthan asked one of his ministers to arrange wood for constructing a new palace. The minister and worker went to a forest near a village inhabited by a Bishnoi community to cut down trees. The Bishnoi community is known for its peaceful existence with nature. The effort to cut down trees by the kings was thwarted by the Bishnois. The Bishnoi woman Amrita Devi showed extreme courage by hugging a tree and daring king's men to cut her first before cutting a tree. The tree mattered much more to her than her own life. Sadly, the king's men did not yield to her pleas and cut down the tree along with the Amrita Devi. Her 3 daughters and hundreds of other Bishnois followed her and thus lost their lives saving trees. Nowhere in history do we find a commitment of this magnitude when human beings sacrificed their lives for the cause of the environment. So another case study is the Chipko movement of Garhwal Himalayas. In 1974, local women showed enormous bravery in protecting trees from the acts of contractors by hugging them. People all over the world have acclaimed the Chipko movement. Other case study is joint forest management. Realizing the significance of participation by local communities, the government of India in 1980s has introduced the concept of joint forest management, so has to work closely with the local communities for protecting and managing forests. In return for their service to the forest, the communities get a benefit of various forest products, example fruits, gum, rubber, medicine, etc. And thus the forest can be conserved in a sustainable manner. Okay, till here we have discussed about environmental issues.
Thank you.